David and Goliath, an anecdotal learning from that particular point. Professor Swaran Singh, I'm going to come to you next. And before I do that, this is a nice segue to talk about some of those comments about energy at the World Economic Forum speech in Switzerland that weren't really grounded in reality. Let me just read some of those points out. Gasoline costs less on average than it did a year ago in the United States, but prices are generally higher than the president claimed over there. And many US oil and gas producers are apprehensive about investing in Venezuela. He says Venezuela is going to earn more money in the next 6 months than it did in the last 26 years. I mean, just to quote the US president, he says, "We give so much and get so little in return." Those were the words of US President Donald Trump at the WEF speech in Davos, and using yet another global stage to push his Make America Great Again agenda. Mind you, to all the panelists, that MAGA means Make America Go Away in Denmark. It followed a familiar playbook. First the United Nations, it's now Davos, tariff threats, NATO pressure, China bashing, attacks on Europe, and now his boldest and most unapologetic pitches yet, it's Greenland. Professor Swaran Singh, what do you make of that particular speech? If a NATO ally threatens another NATO ally, who enforces the rules by the end of it?
I think, first of all, this speech, of course, was much bigger platform, maybe more emphatic and much awaited. But the nature of the gist of his speech was no different from whatever else he's been saying in all his speeches earlier, where his claims are often outlandish, his statistics are, normally you have leaders sometimes being selective in using statistics. He cooks his own statistics. He describes his 1 year being the best period for United States in terms of economic power and so on. The best period everyone knows was Kennedy era, when US GDP was about 40% of the world. Today it's about 26%, which is also strong. Claiming inflation has come to an end. I mean, inflation has just slightly from Biden's 2.9 to now 2.7, and growth rate actually is lower. Biden's growth rate was 2.8, and last year was 2.3, and now the Congressional Budget Office says next year, which is this year, will be 2.2. So, his claims and statistics are no different than what he's been doing so far. What is interesting is that gradually nations are beginning to respond, in terms of enough is enough sense. So, French president, for example, used the word bully to describe what is happening from the side of President Trump. Mark Carney, the Canadian Prime Minister, even had more interesting formulations, saying if middle powers don't come together now on the big table, then there will be the menu of the big table in that sense. So I think more emphatic voices. Interesting to note, none of the 31 nations of NATO, plus United States, of course, none of them have supported President Trump's idea of his claim to Greenland. Most of them are muted, but some of them are now also becoming far more proactive and assertive. Macron, for example, suggested to hold a sort of NATO exercise in Greenland. Antonio Costa, the president of the European Council, is going to hold a meeting in Brussels of European countries tomorrow, which might see some response to the speech. And look at the larger picture, the way it is drifting. $30 trillion economy of United States has no trade deal with China, which is 20 trillion, no trade deal with the European Union, which is $23 trillion economy put together. And indeed, that negotiations were already derailing even before this speech. I think that the timing is very interesting. Now convert it and look at what other countries are doing. The same European Union is negotiating and going to conclude a trade deal, FTA, coming Tuesday with India. So most nations are trying to
of all deals. Ursula von der Leyen is calling it the mother of all deals, Professor.
Exactly. So nations are looking at what other ways they can, gradually reduce their dependence on President Trump. Issues of unemployment are already up in the United States. His MAGA is upset with him with, entanglements abroad. A rightist, alternative for Deutschland, the rightist party in Germany is criticizing him. So it's gradually showing the fault lines and the cracks in his leadership. And therefore, there's a mime in social media that shows him saying that, elections in November, the midterm elections, Democrats might come up and they might start impeachment against him, etc., etc. These are crazy possibilities that are showing that both at home as also abroad around the world, nations are beginning to now find ways to deal with this very unpredictable President Trump.
Yep.
There is absolutely no reality of threats from China. China has nothing in Greenland. Russia would not like, because Russia sees it as a threat, as a center for American forces. So all this.
Well, according to the U.S. president, he says if it wasn't for the United States, we'd all be speaking in German and maybe a little bit of Japanese as well. I mean, thankfully, this is an English channel. It would have been a German channel.
30 seconds. Just allow me 30 seconds to say.
Go ahead, Professor.
Please allow me 30 seconds to say his claim that he has done things for NATO is false. NATO countries have always stood with United States. Remember 9/11? There has never been attack on 31 NATO forces, NATO countries. So United States has not directly ever contributed to direct security. Of course, the claim is that because US is very powerful, therefore they have not been attacked.
All right. Well, all right. Okay, well, we'll have to wait and find out. Donald Trump described Greenland as critical to United States' national security. That was essentially the benchmark of his speech. And Trump warned US wants full ownership, not a lease. How can we secure something that we don't own, is what Donald Trump said, and floated plans for a golden dome on the territory, ruled out force, but pushed for immediate negotiations. Here are some more excerpts from that fiery speech. Professor Swaran Singh right on the other side.
All we want from Denmark for national and international security and to keep our very energetic and dangerous potential enemies at bay is this land on which we're going to build the greatest golden dome ever built. We're building a golden dome.
Well, that was about the Golden Dome. Now take a look at this, Professor. On NATO, Donald Trump questioned the alliance's commitment to the United States. He said America would stand by NATO 100%. You earlier debunked that theory as well, but was unsure if allies would do the same for the United States. Now, Donald Trump claimed the United States has been paying nearly everything for NATO's security. We give everything, we get nothing back in return. That was another, portion where Donald Trump quipped the same. Listen into this excerpt as well.
This would not be a threat to NATO. This would greatly enhance the security of the entire alliance, the NATO alliance. The United States is treated very unfairly by NATO. I want to tell you that. And when you think about it, nobody can dispute it. We give so much and we get so little in return. And I've been a critic of NATO for many years. And yet I've done more to help NATO than any other president by far, than any other person. You wouldn't have NATO if I didn't get involved in my first term.
Well, so NATO faces pressure as well, Professor. I've been told to go into another commercial break, but before that, let's give you 30 seconds to put that particular soundbite into perspective. Professor, you'll have to unmute yourself. Sorry, we can't hear you in the studio.
Sorry, just two quick
lines
on this. One, NATO has always stood by United States. After 9/11, when United States pushed NATO nations into Iraq and Afghanistan, so there is no question of NATO having not supported United States. United States has never ever directly defended any of the NATO countries which have never been attacked. That's point number one. Second, whether United States can defend a territory only when it is occupying that territory as a sovereign authority. Does he says that we can defend only when we are actually sovereign occupant of that territory? Should send very dangerous signal to all the NATO members, all the alliance partners in Japan, South Korea, and everybody else, because he will not come to your defense unless he is the sovereign authority of that territory. So it's a very hilarious way of talking about this. On Greenland, he already has 1951 treaty that allows him all access in terms of building defenses. In 70s, there used to be thousands of soldiers there, which are now less than 200. So it is themselves, they have neglected it. And they returned it. That's a joke because the monarchy in Denmark was never demolished, even under German occupation. Even under German occupation, de jure monarchy was still there and it was still the authority as far as Greenland is concerned. A government in exile had signed an agreement with them to defend that territory where Germans had not gone and occupied. Denmark was occupied. So, one after another, one can debunk all his arguments, which look sometimes hilarious the way he sort of builds up his own case. And I think tomorrow, when we have this meeting of European nations in Brussels, we might see some formal response coming in response to his speech.
All right, then historical facts served to you viewers. Want to talk about Zelensky, but Professor Swaran Singh with us, domain expert. Professor, we do need your insights on this one. This is breaking development. The European Union and India have agreed to advance a new security and defense partnership, a move that is aimed at strengthening strategic ties between the two powers. How are you looking at these developments? EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas has confirmed that both parties will proceed with signature of the agreement very, very soon.
I think India has often, in last 10 years, created several such spectacular examples of doing things which were least anticipated. So other than the FTA, which is being concluded on Tuesday, and which is actually a groundbreaking FTA because of its philosophy not being restricted to only tariffs, but to resilience and diversification, is going to allow India's services sector to become a potent exporting tool for India. Estimates are after the FTA, it will see the rise of 20% in services exports to European Union. Likewise, this report and the news that you just mentioned of defense and strategic cooperation, individually with several of these countries, we do have very strong relations. But now at the European Union level, I think that again showcases enough is enough approach by both European Union and India and maybe several other countries that are trying to strongly explore alternatives. And I think here is a lesson for President Trump not to appear, patronizing and condescending, like saying, Mark Carney, who may be sitting in the audience, Zelensky, who may be sitting in the audience, whereas Zelensky is in Kiev and might meet tomorrow, perhaps. Steve Bitkov, of course, is going to meet President Putin in Moscow. So that language of being an imperial, super lord is showcasing that it is actually pushing other nations to find alternatives. And in that sense, we will see that kind of trend where gradually other nations will begin to come together, find alternatives.
All in all, gentlemen, Ambassador, Professor, Major General,